Okay, so there's this newest health trend that you might have seen on social media about these kids injecting peptides. And there's a lot of them. There's BPC 157, there is CJC 1295. I saw a kid the other day pinning NAD plus, and I have a lot of opinions about this, so I just want to make this video. This might be a little bit of a rant, but I kind of want to talk about just why I think this whole situation is just completely crazy and has gone out of control. So to begin, like I said, a lot of the times these kids, these are actual kids, like 19, 18, 17, 18, 19-year-olds that are ordering things from the internet and quite literally injecting it into their body. And there are just so many reasons that I have an issue with this. First of all, I think half the time these kids don't even know what it's for. They just see another creator that have, advocated for it, and they just follow them. And a lot of times it's possible that people can do their own research, of course, but these kids are just putting far too much trust into the places that they order these, things from. I commented on this video that I saw on my Instagram, and this guy said he's pinning NAD plus for cellular metabolism and regeneration or some absolute nonsense. I just thought, in my head, I'm thinking, first of all, I have a degree in biochemistry from the University of California, Irvine. So I'm not saying I know, I'm the god of everything. I know things. There's just a certain level of knowledge that you get and a certain level of experience that allows you to approach these things with clarity. So this kid says he's injecting NAD plus for cellular metabolism. Actually, let me bring up the comment just to see what he said exactly. This guy said, "I'm pinning NAD plus LOL for energy production and cellular metabolism. But yeah, bro, to each their own." There are just a number of problems that come with this. First of all, injecting anything to me is just absolutely insanity. Unless it's absolutely necessary to save your life, I think it's crazy to legit inject a needle into your body. The second problem I have with this is that these kids are ordering them online, and it says for research use only. You have no idea where these places are getting these chemicals from, and you don't know how they're being made. You know nothing. There's no evidence that these people there's like any regulation behind it, and they just willy-nilly order them online and inject it into their body. Third, there is zero FDA approval. There's zero regulating body behind any of this stuff. Another thing is there's not enough science. There's no studies. There's zero evidence that this stuff is advantageous. It's purely based on anecdotes, and if there are studies done on animals and rats and mice, and it's never humans. There's never like clinical trials from humans and sample sizes that are big enough to actually make like logical conclusions. So for a number of reasons, I thought this was insanely crazy. Fifth reason, sixth, I lost track, whatever number I'm on. This guy is injecting something that you can get the same exact result by taking supplements that you're supposed to be taking anyways. For example, energy production. How many vitamins do that? Vitamin B complex is going to be your best bet for energy production. Cellular metabolism. People take creatine all the time. So creatine, vitamin B complex, vitamin D3, there's so many different like natural supplements you can take that your body needs and produces anyways, but you're not injecting them. You can just pop a vitamin like a normal person. A whole other situation, I'm not going to talk about this very in depth, but there's a whole issue about like natty or not. Are you natural if you're injecting stuff? Like, of course, this is not there. It's not like steroids. Although the chemical structure of a peptide can be a hormone, and a hormone can be a peptide. So they're not the same, but they, a peptide is like a small chain of amino acids or something, but that's a very broad definition for peptide. I know this kid like said that in his comment section, but that really doesn't mean anything. Everything is a long chain of amino acids at the end of the day. I'm not saying you're not natural. I just think it's just completely unnecessary. And this is like setting yourself up to be okay with like pinning actual drugs and steroids and crazy stuff. This is my problem with it. Like I said, 99% of the time, there's zero research behind any of these like chemicals. There's zero evidence that it's going to be like useful. It's purely based off anecdotal experience. And another thing is that people are taking peptides, they're injecting peptides for nootropic reasons, like nootropic peptides. For example, C-Max, I've heard of. And they're like, oh, it's the new Adderall. A lot of this stuff is just so crazy to me, because when it comes to prescription medication, there is obviously FDA approval. There have been thousands upon thousands of studies and like actual evidence that these things work, and they are prescribed for a reason by a licensed physician that has studied for years to overlook the administering of the patients taking these medications. When we get into the zone of injecting stuff that crosses the blood-brain barrier and now affects your brain and your mind and mental health, this is a super slippery slope. And one of the biggest reasons why it's super risky is because since these are so new, there's no studies, there's no FDA approval, no one knows what will happen to the people in 10 years from now, in the long term, in 15, 20, when people are older. What will happen to these people as a result of literally injecting synthetic compounds? So it could very well be the case that when people are 60, 70, and in their youth they were injecting C-Max and BPC 157 and all these crazy peptides. They're actually not that crazy, but I'm just exaggerating. It could very well be the point that these people get a crazy amount of neurodegeneration, and no one knows what can happen. These people can be prone to Alzheimer's, people can be prone to dementia, people can be prone to, when it comes to stuff like that, that's not studied, that's not something I would mess around with in the slightest. Not only are you, I feel like when people inject this stuff, they're taking peptides, you're just accepting the loss. Half the time, it's just taking the L that you want to cheat, you want to get around, you want to achieve your goals faster for whatever reason. And listen, I'm all for peptides for the right reasons, when they're prescribed in the right context, when, people are using them correctly. But when people are just randomly ordering stuff off the internet and it's just like, they have no idea what they're doing, they have no idea what they're talking about, they've done no research, there's no evidence. This is where I kind of have a problem with it. So I know the whole field of peptides is incredible. I'm not saying that it's not by any means. Peptides are just fantastic. I think this is, I can make a whole video about why they're so good. This is going to be a new field in the future. Once more studies are published, once there's more research, once there's more FDA approval, I think this could be a very promising field of medicine. But until then, I think, like, for example, these kids that are 17, 18, 19 years old are taking BPC 157 to increase their growth hormone. I think this is crazy. First of all, you're a younger guy. You don't need any extra growth hormone unless you have some actual medical deficiency. And in that case, you should be seeing a medical professional to begin with that will actually prescribe you HGH or whatever you need under medical supervision, right? Another thing is, by taking these injections and peptides, that doesn't mean you're off the hook and you could just, live life and you're going to look like a Greek god. It doesn't work like that. I think it sets people up for the mindset that once they take these things and they're cheating, like, they're good. They don't need to put in the work. You still need to lift. You still need to eat. You still need to make sure your sleep is dialed in. You have to make sure all these habits are dialed in. So I think first, hop on a exercise plan, hop on a diet plan, make sure you're getting the amount of sleep that you need. And then if all else fails, then maybe consider some exogenous, peptides or whatever. But until then, there is absolutely like zero excuse to be taking these things, especially when you're a 17, 18, 19-year-old man. You are at the peak of your, youth and peak of your recovery. You're never going to recover as fast. Your hormones are going crazy. This is why I also think it's just like insanity for these kids to be taking TRT and testosterone and, tren and steroids. Like, unless there's some actual medical deficiency, which I will admit this happens to a lot of kids. Unless there's some actual deficiency and someone is consistently consistently getting blood test results that show low test, like 100, like your levels are like 50 or 100. So there's some obvious problem. If that's not the case, there should be no reason people are, taking any of this stuff for long-term reasons, for short-term reasons. Also, peptides are not going to be a crazy, there isn't going to be a crazy before and after, right? Like, I think people might have this expectation that they could just take this thing and then they're going to transform into the Hulk, like how steroids can do sometimes with people. You could just become absolutely massive. Peptides will not do that. I think if you were to put the exact same person, let's say someone was cloned, right? And one of them takes peptides and does the same things, and the other one doesn't, you would almost be able to tell no difference. It does not make that big of a difference. I think there's so many issues with this, unless it's something that has been studied. I know there are plenty of new science coming with peptides and stem cells and crazy stuff. We can make a whole nother video about that. But yeah, just be careful with all these trends that you see on the internet. And yeah, don't follow everything that you see. Don't be a sheep. Make sure you're doing your own work. Make sure you have your own, you still have a responsibility to make sure you're doing what you need to do in the gym and in the kitchen. So yeah, I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed, and we will touch base in a future video.